Hello, my name is Carly Munns, and today I will be discussing the island biogeography theory, specifically looking at the relationship between three main variables: endemic species richness, human modification to the landscape, and the friction of distance that modification creates for species across the nation. We will begin by examining some research previously conducted on island biogeography, including those listed here on the screen. The article by David M. Theobald is based on ecological integrity, which is defined as the ability of a landscape to support and maintain a community of organisms. Therefore, a landscape with high ecological integrity would support natural evolutionary and ecological processes. Using these definitions, he develops a model that gives specific value to areas of land based on their human modification, both in terms of magnitude and footprint. The magnitude is measured by the degree to which human activity modifies the natural ecological system within that landscape, while the footprint is measured by the extent to which that human activity reaches geographically. Each ecological system within the United States is then assigned a value, called an ecological indicator, between 0 and 1 to assess the degree of human modification to the nation. The findings of this research show the western part of the United States, specifically the Intermountain area, has been least modified, while the eastern part of the United States, most notably the Great Lakes region, have been most significantly modified. An important correlation found here is the tendency for landscapes to be more modified with decreasing protection. This map depicts several red hotspots of human modification and urbanization in large cities. Yellow areas where farming has dominated the landscapes, and green areas where the land has been relatively unmodified. Theobald makes a valuable connection between his research findings and conservation efficiency. The previous map showed the degree of human modification, which when combined with gap code indicators, creates a map that shows which land would be best used for conservation. The map provides a quick and easy understandable way for conservationists to identify which lands are the least modified and how they are currently managed. The article by Jenkins et al. Explains that the original intent behind the selected lands for protection within the United States had more to do with protecting a view or beauty rather than ecological processes and biodiversity. Through a process of assigning priority scores to the ecological systems based on their endemic species populations, Jenkins finds that most of the priority areas for conservation lie along the west coast and inland southeast of the United States. As depicted on these maps, our current protected areas lie mainly within the inner western part of the United States, leaving the west coast and the inland southeastern portions of the United States unprotected. There is a clear mismatch of current conservation priority and biodiverse landscapes, according to Jenkins' research. A study by Farkas et al. Looks at the issues of maladaptation. According to Farkas, maladaptation changes the abundancy and richness of species within a local ecological system. According to the island biogeography theory, by increasing the land area dedicated to protecting these ecological systems and increasing the connectivity between them, colonization and species richness rates will increase, while extinction rates will decrease. The graph indicates the relationship between these variables. In this study conducted by Farkas et al., they looked at the evolutionary processes of moths and found two main discoveries. First, when moths were introduced to several different habitat types, represented as different colored trees in the diagram, the moths were more likely to successfully adapt to their new environment than when they were introduced to a single type of habitat with no variation. As shown in the diagram, a habitat with more diversity will support a stronger ability for adaptation, and therefore species richness, while a habitat with little to no diversity will likely induce an issue of maladaptation, leading to the inevitable extinction of less adaptable and more vulnerable species. The equilibrium theory of island biogeography, as discussed by Simberloff, explains that islands of habitat that are further from the mainland or source of reproduction will have fewer species than islands of habitat near the mainland or source of reproduction. The diagrams here show the important relationship between island distance and connectivity and area. The island biogeography equilibrium theory is in full effect when the immigration of new species and the extinction of some species already present balance out. Given this research, three main beginning research questions are presented. Do current federal protected lands encompass areas of high endemic species richness? To what degree have humans modified current federal protected lands? Are current federal protected lands easily navigable? GIS models and maps are used to address these questions and their underlying principles. Using data from Theobald's study, a human modification layer was intersected with a map of current federal protected lands. The result is a map of the degree of human modification within the federal protected lands. Intersecting a friction of distance layer with the federal protected lands layer creates a map depicting the ease of navigability within those federal protected lands. And taking the data from Jenkins et al. Study and intersecting it with the federal protected lands layer produces a map that shows the effectiveness of current protected lands in terms of endemic species richness and biodiversity. After running the model, this is what the human modification levels look like within the federal protected areas of the United States. Greener areas are less modified, while the red areas are highly modified. As you can see, most of the federal protected lands remain largely unmodified by humans and lie within the inner western part of the nation. The next map shows the friction of distance within those federal protected lands. Greener areas are more easily navigable, while the red vine areas pose a high challenge and risk for movement between ecological systems. While there are large patches of green within the federal protected areas in the west, there are large expansive red areas that intersect them, making connectivity for migration or reproduction difficult for some species. It is also important to note that most of the federal protected lands in the southeastern part of the nation remain largely piecemeal and unnavigable. The third map shows the endemic species richness of the federal lands we have chosen to protect, with the red areas being less prioritized and diverse, and the green areas being of the highest priority and diversity. You can see that most of our current protected lands are red, low priority. While these areas may be large and expansive, they likely do not support a habitat conducive to vulnerable or at-risk species. The green areas in the southeastern part of the nation are relatively well protected, but pieced together sporadically without accessible corridors for species to move, migrate, and mate effectively. While this project is not yet complete, we can begin to look for studies that either support or discredit the findings the maps have shown so far. We'll take a look at the two articles listed here on the screen. Research by Diamond et al. Explains that humans are modifying and effectively destroying some habitats, such as tropical rainforests, while creating others, such as roadsides and pastures. The research finds that because species vary in terms of habitat and ecological needs, we should not be treating protected lands as a one-size-fits-all approach. Larger islands are almost always preferable. As Diamond et al. Points out, there is rarely a species who would be negatively affected by too much room to roam. This article by Brown and Kodrick-Brown reaffirmed the island biogeography equilibrium theory while adding an important piece of additional consideration. They explain that the interaction of island size and connectivity determine the equilibrium rate. Their addition to the traditional theory includes a rescue effect, in which high rates of immigration might stabilize and prevent the extinction of species which are vulnerable in that particular habitat. This study confirms and furthers the idea that larger, more connected islands of habitat would be most beneficial for ecological processes and biodiversity to flourish. Thank you for watching this presentation on island biogeography.